Right. I am so excited to start off this video, my first episode of this video podcast, with two summer associates who started their own nonprofit organization in their free time during To Hell. The organization's called Fighting for Fairness, and it's a program that is geared towards providing low-income students resources to help them get into law school. But I don't want to steal all their thunder, so I will let them explain it. But before they talk about the organization, I do want them to be able to introduce themselves. So why don't we start with Brad? Brad, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, definitely. My name is Brad Carney. I am a rising 3L now at Harvard Law. And before law school, I was a tutor for the LSAT. And I guess before that, I was an undergrad. And then before that, I was in the Army. Um, and now, I guess this summer, I am summering at Sidley, Austin, in DC.
Sure.
Justine?
So my name's Justine. I am a rising 3L at Michigan and better known as Brad's study buddy for the LSAT. I also LSAT tutored with Brad before law school, and I spent my 1L summer at Davis Polk. I spent my 2L summer now at Sullivan and Cromwell. I thought I wanted to go to law school. I'm a first generation lawyer because I thought I wanted to do juvenile justice. Started at a firm, realized that I hated litigation, even though I very much so admire the litigators. I know you are one. I'm sorry.
That's
um,
okay.
a lot of respect for you guys, but not what I want to do. And I did some self-reflection and realized that I really wanted to do it because I wanted to give back in a way where I would show empathy. I had a great experience with a public defender when I was young. They really helped me put me on the right path to be better, to really analyze what I wanted out of my life. And having that mentorship from a public defender made me think that I wanted to give back in the same way that they have and serve kids. But when I realized that I didn't like litigation, sadly that was out. And then this is my way of giving back now that I'm in law school from my corporate nonprofit perspective.
So I was so happy to hear about this organization. I mean, I personally have benefited from pipeline diversity initiatives that provide LSAT and admissions resources. I don't think it would have been possible for me to go to law school without those. So I really want to hear the background of how you all came up with this idea to start this organization. So what was the driver behind it?
So I had this idea. I wanted to give back. I mean, Brad and I primarily worked with low income students. We would charge the lowest price that we could. We worked for LSAT, which is the first and I think only woman of color owned LSAT tutoring company. Um, and we kept seeing the same problems repeatedly occurring where these low income students would waste time using resources that didn't work. They didn't have the funding, and then they would have to spend more money coming to us to rectify those problems. And I thought, why not us? We've experienced this. We were low income applying to law school. We've worked with low income students. Why not us and why not now? We know how to do this and we can figure the rest out. And so I would not want to do this with anyone except Brad. And I remember telling friends that I'm not doing this unless Brad does it with me. And so I approached Brad and I said, you want to do this crazy thing together? And of course, the rest is history. He did want to do it with me.
Yeah, and I'll just tack on, if I can, that one of the, I guess, really big keys for me was tutoring uh, people in like very difficult situations with like kids running around, dogs, I mean, just they have families, they have careers, balancing all that. And I was fortunate enough to be able to work enough to afford an admissions consultant. And the difference between my personal statement when I did not have a consultant versus after made me, I still had to study hard for the LSAT. That no one can do that for anyone, right? But on the admissions front, it really set my entire application to be go from good and maybe convincing to outstanding. And like I would say my personal statement was perfect. Right. And so when she came to me with Justine came to me with this idea, I really had that internalized, like, oh my gosh, just because I was able to work and afford $4,000 worth of services doesn't mean everyone can. And I thought, this is an additional way that we could help people get that level of service who probably could not afford it any other way.
Yeah, and I can attest Brad did study very hard. um but I also had to put the admissions fee, or sorry, the consulting fees on a credit card because it
Mhm.
just wasn't affordable. I had to borrow money from family to be able to make that a possibility. And that opportunity cost has changed the trajectory of my life. I'm now getting a debt free education from Michigan law, which is something that I never would have thought was possible when I started looking into how to take the LSAT and how to approach this process. But I know with us, it was a lot of trial and error, using free resources, seeing if it worked for us. I reapplied for a second cycle using that consultant, and the differences, I mean, it was just unreal seeing the opportunities that I could have missed out on as I was receiving them. So for us, this is personal. We want to be in a position to be able to help people, and we really want to come from this place of empathy.
Yeah, no. Thank you for that. For me, as I mentioned, was the beneficiary of a pipeline diversity initiative. I did the UCLA Law Fellows program, so I want to plug them real quick too because they absolutely changed the trajectory of my ability to be able to go to law school. They were able to review my personal statement, and Brad, for me too, the difference between the first draft of my personal statement to what I submitted. I'm someone who did not do particularly well on the LSAT, but I was still able to get into really good law schools. And I went to law school without having to pay any tuition. And that's absolutely as a result of the mentoring that I got through that program. I do want to hear more, though, about your kind of path to law school. Any difficulties that you had in the admissions process? I know, Justine, you touched on it a little bit, but I really want others who are watching this to hear kind of about the vulnerabilities that low income students have as they're going through the application process.
Yeah, I mean, I remember approaching this process and finding the subreddit for studying for the LSAT, and I messaged someone, "Where do you even get these practice tests?" And they said, "It's just a practice test." But for me, I didn't even know where to start, right? I had just Googled LSAT resources, how to start studying for the LSAT, and these seemingly simple questions weren't obvious to me. And it took a lot of getting to know people and having people there for me to ask these seemingly obvious questions. But especially being low income, having to burn through these resources, the LSAT is a very individualized test. What works for me might not work for you or might not work for Brad. So you have to use these resources and see what works for you. Unfortunately, that costs a lot of money. I mean, some of these LSAT courses are thousands of dollars, and for me, that wasn't feasible. The only money that I really spent was one $30 tutoring session, and that was it. And so for us in our program, it was important to have that built in where they would get the tutor, they would get the consultant, they wouldn't have to go through this trial and
Mhm.
error. They would just have a company that they could turn to through us.
Yeah, I will say that I don't know how many hours of there's a specific podcast, the Thinking LSAT podcast. I listened at that point. They had like something like 200 episodes. I listened to quite literally every single episode. I'm not. It's like I'm not joking. I was like because I had to become obsessed because it's either like, oh well, you can have money and have somebody kind of just walk you through it, or you can go. The information is out there. It's just you have to digest it, make it digestible for yourself, and then internalize it. And go through the steps after that. And so it just took a lot of time and a lot of trial and error. And even when I was tutoring, I was like, well, listen, I've already spent so many hours. Like, here, let me give you this method that you could customize, right? Even, And maybe that will save you time because it's flexible to how you learn with respect to like logic games or something like that. So just what I guess one of the aspects that I wanted to give back was people's time, especially because they're working or they have kids. And so it's like time is money in that sense.
And I mean, Brad, you and I took the LSAT, what, 3 times, I believe?
I took it 5.
Yeah, I took
Yeah,
it 3.
3.
So we're
Yeah.
high takers.
Hmm.
And it really took a lot of time to be able to retake the LSAT and get back into studying. And many low income people are caring for their families. They have to do things and live their lives.
Yeah.
And Brad
Yeah.
is right. Time is money, and many people can't afford the luxury of time.
Yeah, not to mention the fees involved in applying and taking the test, which they've raised in the
Yes.
last what? Yeah, they just announced that they're raising the LSAC fees, making it even more expensive to apply to law school. um, so, how, when coming up with developing the organization, like what resources were you pulling from? Because you all came up with this idea, and you're still law students, so um, and you're balancing your schedules. People on your board are all from different law schools, so how have you managed to come up with this organization?
Sure. So, I mean, the idea was really from what we'd observed from tutoring. Brad and I had an initial call to discuss what we really wanted out of this program. And we talked about how we wanted to offer these resources, how we wanted to give them money to be able to afford to study for the LSAT. And of course, I think it's what, 17 times. If you have an attorney as a parent, you're 17 times more likely to go into law. So having a mentor there to ask these seemingly obvious questions
Mm.
to is such a valuable experience. We wanted to give everyone everything in one. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think, and when we were, and Justine's very humble. She's an extremely humble person because when she says like Brad and I, it's like Justine 90% and Brad is like trying to add in little anything that's valuable. So I'm just going to make sure that everyone understands that Justine puts in so much work. Um,
one of the most important things was building a well-rounded team for us. 4 of our members are prior SEOs, which is a wonderful pipeline program that is essentially a big law summer before you start law school. They do the institute teaching you the basics of law. Really wonderful opportunity. Um, I reached out to Brad. We'd known each other before that, but Beatriz and Alphonse we met through SEO, and Rachel we met from LSAT. We wanted people whose weaknesses complement our strengths. And having that team as law students is so valuable because we all have to put in a lot of time and we can all rely on each other. I think as well, I mean, sorry, I'm also trying to think. I have an important point. I can't remember it. I'm so
It's okay.
sorry.
So I'm going to interrupt you real quick just because I want to clarify that SEO does not mean search engine optimization. SEO is Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, and they have a variety of programs, but they're talking about their corporate law program. And I am going to link information about that program in the show comments as well.
We very purposely turned down some extracurricular opportunities to be able to make this a reality because 2L is extremely busy. The work is a little easier. 1L is a time. But the extracurriculars are really what make it as busy as it is. So I purposely did not apply to journal because this is an immediate need that I can fix. And this is a passion project for me. This is something that I would rather be doing than site checking. And I have a lot of respect for people in journal. I just really wanted to make this a reality because this is a need that I can fix. And I think, Brad, you did the same where you didn't also join a journal.
yeah, yeah. And I think when we were tutoring, we were able to see like, wow, this is extremely impactful, right? I mean, just working with different clientele than the people who could afford, let's say, 150 an hour. Um, and it's like, how do we have that impact on a larger scale? Because, law firms do great pro bono work and that's great. But maybe it's a slightly different clientele and we are very close to this issue. It was like very intimate to us. because we spent like at least a couple of months doing this type of tutoring. And it's like, I know I became friends with like people's families. And so it was like, oh, okay, well, I can only give so much of my time realistically, right? I also have to work too. And so how can we have a wider reach and do this on a more systematic scale?
Yes.
So you have released applications for your first fellowship cohort, and it's available on the website, which I'm also going to link down below. And you have applications due June 1st, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So what are you looking for in this first cohort in terms of applications?
What we look for in the application is really the essays. I mean, that's the heart of it. Financial need is a given because this is only available to low income students. But we have no GPA floor. We were very intentional about not having a GPA floor because life happens when you're low income and school is not always a priority. Even if people have taken the LSAT in the past, that's not a huge indicator for us. We're looking at your essays to see your potential, to see what you want to do in this field, the diversity of thought that you want to bring, your lived experiences, and how they contribute to how you think. We want to choose people that are going to contribute meaningfully to the field and help encourage and foster people becoming lawyers.
Yeah. And I think, because we have such a diverse team in a myriad of important ways. So I applied, my LSAT GPA was like a 2.8, right? And I'm at Harvard now. So it's like your GPA doesn't necessarily, your LSAT GPA, let me say that, doesn't necessarily tell the entire story. LSAT, like Justine took it 3 times, I took it 5, right? And so what I think, if we're summarizing everything, or I guess one important aspect characteristic of a person is that they have this kind of like, I don't know, optimism about themselves, that they kind of, it's like you can almost see leadership in them, right? Whether you just, there's something about them that's like, hey, if we give this person an opportunity, because they have not been given this opportunity, but if we give it to them, or we help them, try to, uh, get them to a place where they can have a myriad of opportunities, then like watch them flourish and watch them give back to communities just like we're trying to, right? And I think that's the best case scenario we could ask for, right? Is a leader, a person who's a leader, thoughtful, comes from situations like ours, and then understands that they perhaps have a responsibility and they're going to try to do something about the situations that they care about.
Yeah, you said it much better than I can. The essays are the largest component for us, and
Mhm.
I really hope that people don't self-select themselves out because we don't care what your GPA is. We want to know where you're going and where you
Mhm.
envision yourself going and what you envision yourself doing as a lawyer. That matters most to us.
So one of the themes that I hope to continue talking about on this video podcast, of which you guys are the very first episode, so congratulations, well deserving. But I really want to focus on this idea of the power of the pipeline. There's a group of us who have all benefited from others who are willing to pay it forward and help us. And I do think that because we've been beneficiaries of that, that we definitely have it instilled in us that we have to contribute back to the next generation. Um, and I also try to tell people to really leverage the alumni networks of these, different cohorts, because they will all feel the way you feel and they want to help you, and that you should not be scared to ask for help. So in that vein and with that theme, what can the legal community do to help your organization succeed? This is the time to make your ask.
Sure, all help is greatly appreciated. We would love attorneys who are looking to mentor or those who can financially give back. I mean, we have greatly benefited from people offering us their time and mentorship and advice. I mean, we've been selected as SEOs, which is an amazing network. I know that if I ever ask another SEO question, they're always generous with their time. I've relied on mentors who've guided me through. I've relied on Brad, who's the person and the reason why I applied to SEO, because I nearly self selected myself out and I applied on the deadline. But we've been the beneficiaries of so many people's time. And for us to be able to give back in this way, we do rely on others to be able to help sustain this program.
Yeah, I think just to add on, um, we've been lucky to have, close friends and mentors. I know some of my mentors have already given to our organization. And, you know, I, I guess one of the things for people who have, like us, that have been through it and have seen the power of the pipeline, just like think about how much of like your trajectory changed once you were in the pipeline, and how, it just, life somehow becomes like way easier once you're on the pipeline path. It's uncanny. It's unreal, right? The connections you have, all the people you know. And so it's like I do think we have some obligation. And so, obviously it doesn't, there's many other organizations than ours, but I think that we are doing something different in the legal space, um, by focusing especially on low income. And I think this matters because you see other law schools now doing similar things, where now their uh, income and socioeconomic status seems to be coming more into play with respect to aid and things like that. So it's extremely important because you get so many other different types of diversity when you bring in this socioeconomic status into play.
And it goes in hand with many other types of diversity, where people of color tend to be low income, just statistically speaking, or first gen, statistically speaking. And you hit so many different aspects of diversity by focusing on low income people. I think that's extremely valuable. But I also think of the Maya Angelou quote, right? Where you can't wear a catcher's mitt on both hands. Eventually, you have to throw something back. And like you said, we have been the recipients of so much time and so many resources. And for us, we want to be able to give back too.
Okay, so I know you guys are. I mean, poor Brad is still in the office right now.
I love being in the
They're
office.
very busy with their summer associate internships right now. But I do want to end on a lightning round. So just I want quick tips. Round one will be quick tip for pre-law students. We'll start with you, Brad.
Um, Logic games, logic games, logic games. Um, don't stress too much. Focus on your GPA. If you're pre-law, focus on your GPA, and that's what matters. You have extreme control over that. Please focus on that.
Justine, pre-law students.
I'm going to give something different than the LSAT, Brad. I'm going to say don't be afraid to cold email. It's so normal in this field to reach out to people and to ask for help. If you want to get to know about the field of law and you don't have an attorney in your immediate family, ask. People are so generous with their time if you show interest in what they're doing. Please do not self select yourself out from getting that helpful advice.
All right, advice for new law students that will be starting in the fall. Start with you, Justine.
You are so much more than your GPA. Don't lose sight of your hobbies. You are a well rounded human being with interests and family and people who love you. It's so easy to only focus on your GPA because so many cretiноusly stress the importance of grades for your 1L job. I was below average in GPA for my 1L job, and I still spent the summer at Davis Polk. I really got to know the attorneys before I applied, and that was so vital for me to be able to get that job and return after my SEO summer. So please, please, please do not underscore who you are as a person and don't lose sight of that.
Great advice. If so, I'll provide the grades. Not that I have the grades. I'm a mediocre student. But if I would say to steal it from SEO, what we were told, so much is don't lose sight or realize the game that you're supposed to be playing, which is the final exam. It is not every day cold calls. It's not every single day readings. Obviously, you probably need to do some readings. Maybe you should prepare for a cold call or two because it's fun. But at the end of the day, the final is what you're graded on, and that's what matters. And so realizing that at the beginning of the term is going to set you apart from people who are thinking that everyday class is the real game, because it's just not. Final exam.
All very good advice. Um, Thank you so much, both Justine, Brad, for your time. This was amazing, and this is very much in line with what I want this, video podcast to be. So I'm going to put information for Fighting for Fairness down in the show notes, and also want to remind everyone that the deadline is June 1st. Definitely apply, and I really look forward to seeing how the first cohort turns out and helping with the organization any way I can. But thank you so much for joining me during your busy 2L summers.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much
much.
for having us.